All right, everyone. So I'm not filming from my regular desk because I was injured. I was attacked by a rooster. I am not joking right now. I was attacked by a rooster. As funny as that sounds, that is what has happened to me. This rooster hit me with his spurs. He hit me right underneath the knee, and it was painful, and it's still painful. And so I've been limping around all day. This thing hit me with his spurs, which are little weapons on the back of his talons. And believe it or not, they're actually made from the same material as rhino's horns. So I was hit by little rhino horns, and these things are a mix between blades and bludgeons. And he hit me really hard with it, and it was painful. So I can't be sitting on the desk. It's just too discomforting. Anyway, so I want to talk to you guys about something that I've been researching on, and that is how religion always wins. Religion will always win in the end in human society. Atheists love to talk about how, well, by the year 2057, most people are going to be atheists. Atheism is going to take over the world and all this stuff. And the reality is that that's never happened, ever. Even when atheists have taken over governments and they have tried to enforce atheism, religion has always prevailed over the people. Religion has always prevailed in the society. You can just look at Russia. The atheists tried to kill all of the Christians. They tried to destroy religion. They massacred tens of thousands of priests. They tried to destroy religion. But what did that end up doing? It ended up sparking a revival. It really ended up sparking a flame of zeal in Russia. And it really goes to show you that people, by their very nature, are religious. Even people who call themselves atheists will do things that are very religious, like they will revere Charles Darwin, or they will have some sort of pseudo-spiritual system, like people such as Sam Harris, who basically promotes a form of Buddhism. All these people who talk about, well, Buddhism is actually just a form of atheism, but when you read Buddhist scriptures, it talks about gods and spirits and demons, and it's really beyond me how people could consider Buddhism atheism when you actually can read Buddhist texts that talk about, how they are millions upon billions of universes, and in each universe there are millions upon millions of Buddhas, and each Buddha has a light emanating from their foreheads and all this stuff, and it's pretty mythological. But religion is very, very powerful. Why? Because human beings, when we go into a state of depravity, or when we indulge ourselves in debauchery or some kind of degeneracy, a lot of times, generally speaking, people will begin to get tired of it. They will begin to get tired of living as a slave to their flesh. And so they will seek out freedom. And that freedom is gained through religion. This is why so many alcoholics and drug addicts have found freedom from addiction thanks to religion, thanks to Christianity, because they go beyond themselves. Religion is a vehicle by which we as humans go beyond ourselves. And so by going beyond ourselves, we break the shackles of human debauchery. And what got me thinking about this was this book that I have been reading on the French Revolution. It's called The Gods of Revolution by Christopher Dawson, who was a very reputable historian back in his day. And in this book, it talks about how the French Revolution tried to squash religion. It tried to purge Catholicism from France because these rebels really believed that they were ushering in a new epoch of human enlightenment. And part of that enlightenment was to realize that Catholicism is a farce, Christianity is bogus, and that we humans can direct our own morality. We don't need God. We don't need Christianity. We don't need the Bible. We just can find our own moral system from within because humans are naturally good. And this is a part of the Enlightenment system. And really, the Enlightenment fell on its face when you saw the manifestation of its ideas in the French Revolution, when people were butchering each other and people even engaged in cannibalism. Because people really believed that by destroying religion, they could usher in a pure society. Robespierre talked about ushering in a universal age of human regeneration, by which human beings would, in a way, restart themselves. And that would be humans having an enlightened mind, humans without Catholicism or without Christianity. But what ended up happening? You had all of this persecution that was taking place. Priests were thrown in prison or they were executed. Many priests ended up fleeing to England as refugees, religious refugees, and hats off to the English for that. And eventually there was a revival in France and in Europe in general. There was a huge revival in Europe for religion. And it didn't always turn out good, but many times it didn't always turn out bad either. For example, in France, you had the rise of very, very articulate minds, such as Joseph de Maistre, who was a brilliant writer. I read pretty much anything I could grab from Joseph de Maistre. I think his writings are amazing. And then you also had another brilliant mind, René de Chateaubriand. When people think of Chateaubriand, they think of you mean the Chateaubriand steak? Well, no. The Chateaubriand steak is the style of steak that René de Chateaubriand enjoyed for himself in a restaurant. But René de Chateaubriand was a man who at first actually supported the ideologies of the Enlightenment. He sympathized with the revolution, and he was a deist. He rejected his Catholic faith. And his mother was killed by the revolution. His sister was killed by the revolution. Much of his family was killed by the revolution. He ended up being a soldier. He ended up fighting he ended up fighting against a revolt. I believe it was a royalist revolt. And he got shot. And he was left for dead. And he ended up army crawling miles into the countryside, where he was eventually rescued by some French peasant women. Well, before his mother died, his mother, I'm pretty sure, was arrested and thrown into prison, where she died in her prison cell. And before she died, she said that her last wish was for her son to return to the Catholic faith. And that's exactly what René de Chateaubriand did. And he wrote a book called The Beauty of Christianity, which if you have not read this book, you absolutely should. The Beauty of Christianity was one of the best books that I've ever read. Absolutely gorgeous book. But then you also had other people who were representatives of this religious revival. You had people like George Wilhelm Hegel. And George Wilhelm Hegel was a Protestant philosopher who attacked the Catholic Church and attacked Catholic doctrine. He was, of course, representing the Protestant religion of Germany. And his ideas would end up influencing people like Karl Marx. And it really is kind of ironic that someone considered to be a representative of the religious revival of the late 18th century in Europe was also someone who would influence one of the most famous and most destructive atheists in history, Karl Marx. So I'm just putting that in there to add a little bit of balance. Not all religious revival is good. You have to have discernment. You have people like Chateaubriand or Joseph de Maistre who were very good writers, and they had beautiful literature on the Christian religion. But then at the same time, you had people like Auguste Comte, who came up with a new religion called positivism, in which humanity would become God. And Auguste Comte, or it was Augustine Comte. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was Auguste Comte. Anyway, Comte, he believed that human beings intellectually evolved. And so he said, we started out with religion, and then we eventually evolved into believing in philosophy. So basically, religion was for the inferior minds. But he wanted to come up with a new religion called positivism, in which humanity would become God. Humans would become the object of worship because humanity inherently had some sort of divine wisdom. And then you had people like Hegel, who would influence Marxism and would also have a strong influence on really a lot of the later, more destructive ideologies. That's why you'll find people like, what's his name? Slavoj Žižek or whatever, quoting him. So you have not all religious revival is good. That's my whole point. And today, people can point to people like Jordan Peterson, and they could say, well, Jordan Peterson is just great because he has defended religion. But at the same time, Jordan Peterson will reference paganism. He'll reference old ancient Babylonian mythology. Jordan Peterson will even back some social Darwinistic ideas. So not all religious revival is good. It can be very deceptive. But at the same time, religion will always win. We just have to be discerning enough to recognize what is good religion and what is destructive religion. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.